Ritornello, from the chaotic universe to the cosmic deterritorialization. Ritornello is the concept born out of the meeting of the concept of repetition, presented by Deleuze in Difference and Repetition, and the form of musical repetition used in Baroque music. It is often translated as refrain, but this is insufficient to express the conceptual content and is likely to be misunderstood. So, it is more appropriate to use the original word as it is. For this concept starts with rhythmic repetition, but has a much broader meaning, including different kinds of assemblages. When the term ritornello is taken as something like a rhyme used in poetry, or a refrain used in music, its concept is greatly misunderstood. Ritornello is a rhythm or melody that is repeated differently each time it is repeated. So it is far from the refrain of a song repeated in the same pattern. In the realm of music, it is closer to a theme that is repeated with variations in counterpoint or sonata form, rather than a refrain. It should be noted that the French language has the word refrain, but Deleuze-Guattari used the word ritornello instead of it, so when I quote it below, I will correct refrain to ritornello. Ritornello refers narrowly to rhythmic repetition, but it contrasts with the meter. The meter is the form in which the music is articulated in terms of time, and it is the measure that gives a regular unity to the rhythm through the use of note value and dynamics. Most of Western music familiar to us are 2-beat or 3-beat musics. The difference between 2-beat and 4-beat is that the dynamics of beats are different. In the case of 2-beat music, strong wick is repeated in a bar, and in the case of 4-beat, strong wick, semi-strong wick is repeated in a bar in the same pattern. Rhythm is regulated by the meter, but has a differentiative component within it. Rhythm is the repetition of difference, whereas the meter is a repetition without difference. For example, a military march has the meter in it, but nothing is less rhythmic than it. Rhythm is differentiated by changing note value and intensity within a given meter. This intensity differentiation disturbs and even exceeds the beat, even within the meter. In The Rite of Spring, for example, Stravinsky demonstrated that the form of the meter can be disintegrated simply by changing the accent. As for its musical origin, ritornello refers to the form used in concerto or concerto grosso of the Baroque era, where turi and solo are played alternately in a form like T, A, T-B, T-T. Here, the repeated turi of T, T-T is referred to as ritornello, and the solo part played in between is called episode. And the form in which the ritornello and the episode are played alternately is called ritornello form. Therefore, ritornello means both reprise and compositional form using such a reprise. In this case, the turi of T is varied by changing the key each time it is repeated. Therefrom came the rondo form, which was often used later, during the classical period, where the difference is that the repeated theme is played in the same key. Deleuze-Guattari's concept of ritornello means not only a reprise or a form made with materials such as gesture, color, sound, etc., but also an assemblage led by the sonorous component. Moreover, even when used as a concept of assemblage, ritornello is not merely limited to the assemblage led by the sound. In other words, ritornello covers assemblages in general, where sounds or other reprises led territorialization and deterritorialization. Depending on its repeating element, there are sonorous ritornello, chromatic ritornello, gestural ritornello, etc. And there are territoriality ritornello, courtship ritornello, warning ritornello, and social ritornello, depending on their function. To deal with this complexity of the concept of Ritornello, Deleuze-Guattari distinguishes three components of Ritornello: directional components, dimensional components, and components of passage. The directional component of Ritornello is the rhythmic repetition for finding where to go in order to survive in the chaos. Like a child getting comfortable in the dark by saying, the direction for where to go is set through repetitive components. Through this rhythmic repetition, the chaos becomes a habitable milieu. This component, which is repeated periodically, is usually a kind of flag and wall that marks whose territory here is. The word, even art is fundamentally posture, placard, is the case. The same goes for a bird marking its territory by saying, "This is my home." Of course, seeing is not the only case. Repeated smells, repeated gestures, and repeated visible traces, etc., would all be good examples. The edifix or leitmotif, which was used by Berlioz or Wagner to mark the appearance of a particular character, functions the same as a posture or post. As such, the coding of periodic repetition is how the milieu is constructed. This directional component is called infra-assemblage in that it is the primary component on which all assemblages are based. This is the milieu's answer to chaos, in that it constitutes its milieu out of the impermanent conditions surrounding itself. The impermanently changing chaotic universe hereby becomes a chaosmos. Conversely, chaos is said to be the milieu of all milieus, in that it is the condition in which all milieus are born. However, this is not enough. Whereas we can say the meter is the repetition of identity, it can be said rhythm is the repetition of difference. And all the repeating themes are buried and repeated in various ways. In addition, it has different phases when accompanied by a counterpoint melody. What makes an expressive difference within a territorial assemblage like this is the second component of Ritornello, which Deleuze-Guattari called dimensional component. The difference that makes expressive style is now mixed into the coded repetition of directional component that marks the territory. Imitative counterpoint, for example, uses a single theme repeatedly, but at the same time its corresponding counterpoint melodies are mixed into it. Otherwise, repetitive melodies, no matter how beautiful they may be, will quickly become boring. This is why it is difficult for a poster or the placard to become a work of art. Even musical pieces like canon or passacaglia, where a theme is repeated alternately, can have beautiful texture thanks to these counterpoint melodies, not to mention food. To put it simply, it can be said that the counterpoint melody expands the texture into two dimensions by adding sounds in the vertical direction, whereas the melody of the repeated theme itself is one-dimensional in the sense that it proceeds along the horizontal direction. This is what it means to say the second component is called dimensional component, in contrast to the directional component. The word one dimension, of course, is not a well-put expression because the melody itself is made up of sounds with different pitches and also has the component of intensity. Nevertheless, there is no doubt that the number of dimensions increases with the addition of counterpoint components. Therefore, it would be more appropriate to understand the term dimensional component as a component that increases the number of dimensions. With the addition of dimensional components, the original theme or rhythm now moves away from the posture or the flag, and the territorial motif becomes an expressive style. The dimensional component is called inter-assemblage in that it is the component that weaves the territorial expressivity by being mixed into an assemblage. In the case of a movie, it is different melodies that enables a scene to become a different scene and landscape, while the repetitive rhythm corresponds to the same character appearing in many different scenes. It is for this reason that the two components of Ritornello are buried as the concept of rhythmic character and melodic landscape. This shows very well that Ritornello is not merely a concept limited to the sonorous assemblage. Rhythmic character and melodic landscape are not confined to simple binary opposition. Just as the theme and counterpoint of sonata form, a repetitive melody becomes a rhythmic character, which is the face of the musical piece. Different rhythms also create different landscapes. Conversely, as the landscape becomes different, the faces of the characters therein also become different. When the surroundings change, rhythmic characters change their faces and act differently. Depending on the conditions and situations, the songs of bird change. The idiophix or leitmotif also is varied. It has a different face in the different landscapes on each occasion. On the contrary, there are cases where the repetitive landscape becomes a directional component, and the changing word and action of the character becomes an expressive landscape. As you can see, the concepts of rhythmic character and melodic landscape are the crossroad connecting the prelude of Ritornello and that of faciality in 1,000 playlists. This is important for understanding the concept of content, which often corresponds to the expression in a work. Rembrandt's self-portrait, for example, are paintings of the same character, but have faces of different landscapes. If you try to see only whose portrait it is, you don't have a look at an artwork. The same goes for a painting depicting an event. The object represented or the theme depicted in the work is not the content of the work. They are the poster and the flag. It is only when the face becomes a landscape condensed with a certain effect that a painting of a face can become an artwork. The content of the work is not the character or the event represented therein, but the effect condensed in the landscape. Here, the landscape expresses the unique effect of the character or the event that she or he must have experienced, but often the effect even escapes the character. This is the case when it makes you say, "Is this really Rembrandt?" The same is true of an event. This is what happens when the deterritorializing component of passage is strong. The component of passage is another component that differentiates Ritornello as repetition. The component of passage is the one that deterritorializes from an assemblage, whereas the directional component and the dimensional component are those that territorialize on a melodic style. Of course, a reterritorialization to a new assemblage follows there again. A wren, for example, organizes an assemblage to mark its territory by building its nest and singing. If there is a sign of an intruder approaching, it changes its song to produce a warning ritornello. On the other hand, when a female approaches, it flaps its wings and lowers the intensity of the song and turns it into a simple trill to create a courtship ritornello. In this way, the territorial assemblage passes into assemblage of warning or that of courtship by adding or changing the song, gesture, or physical component. It is a passage from one assemblage to another without changing the territory. Like this, the component that enables the passage from one assemblage to another is exactly the component of passage of ritornello. The component of passage is called interassemblage, and that it is between different assemblages. While the territorial motif with which it makes the chaotic universe the home for its own survival is the directional component, and that with which it gives the expressive style to it by decorating its home nicely is the dimensional component, the one that brings in the outside through the door or window is the component of passage. I say bring in, but it actually means the opening of the inside of the home to the outside. It is connecting the inside of the home to the cosmos outside the home. This can be done with small changes. Let's take a human home as an example. For humans, home is usually a milieu for a bulb, my territory, and belongs to a bold assemblage. However, when closing the door and windows and changing the lighting, it changes into a sexually assemblage. And when preparing food and inviting friends, it becomes a social assemblage. The craftsmen or artists of the past used their homes by making them workshop assemblages, and the recent hikikomoris changed their homes into confinement assemblages. For understanding of the word cosmic deterritorialization, better examples can be found in music. Western music has a structure of tonality, where it goes from tonic to dominant and then returns to tonic again, which is a sonorous assemblage made by the harmonic deterritorialization and reterritorialization. However, this structure allows use of chromatic outside of the three harmonic chords. But when the deterritorialization movement proliferates, the permeating chromatism producing another chromatism out of it, the tonality assemblage disintegrates. This deterritorialization movement goes through atonal music, serialism, and electronic music and moves toward the sonorous cosmos open to all frequencies, which is the cosmos of waves or the cosmos of sonorous particles. It is the cosmos of sonorous matters, free from all articulation or forms. The matters of expression, they take on consistency independently of the form-substance relation. It can be said that it is the cosmos that is become univocal by the flow of those matters. The assemblage that Deleuze Guattari called modern in music history is related to the music deterritorialized into the cosmos. To simply add, the component of passage of Ritornello leads to the plane of consistency, drawing the line of absolute deterritorialization. Later, in what is philosophy, this is translated to the concept of plane of composition and draws the line of deterritorialization that leads their art theory. When I say cosmos, this doesn't mean that the universe as a chaos in itself given to us, but the whole thing that has no territory but is connected to all territories at the same time. In other words, the cosmos that the component passage opens it, for example, the flow of non-formalized matter that can compose any sound and means the entire field of virtuality open to all assemblages. While the directional component constructs a milieu out of the chaotic universe and makes the territory by building the world, the component of passage opens up assemblage toward the cosmos of absolute deterritorialization. We proceed from the chaotic universe to the territorial assemblage through Ritornello, but also draw a line of deterritorialization towards the cosmos through it. Like this, life is the ability to take off something from the existing stratum or territory and construct another assemblage to take gains. It is for this reason that where life fits into a distinction implies a gain in consistency or a surplus value of this stratification. In short, the three components of Ritornello operate, creating characters and landscapes. The territorial motif makes the rhythmic characters through repetition. The territorial counterpoint occupies the surroundings of the character, and the component of passage opens the character and landscape to the cosmos. Depending on which of these is dominating component, Ritornello is again divided into different assemblages. For example, they redefine the concepts of modes and eras appearing in European music history into three different assemblages: the classic, romantic, and modern. The classic, which includes both the Baroque and the Classicism, is the name of an assemblage led by the directional component to escape from the chaos. It is structured in such a way as to divide one into two, like the theme and the counterline in counterpoint or two opposing themes in sonata form, etc. The romantic is the assemblage led by terrestrial territorialization, and the modern is the assemblage led by the component of passage that opens the cosmic deterritorialization. Ritornello is related to any assemblage in which rhythmic repetition is operative. However, Deleuze Guattari often defines as Ritornello the assemblage led by sound as opposed to gesture or color. In a general sense, we call a refrain any aggregate of matters of expression that draws a territory and develops into territorial motifs and landscapes. In the narrow sense, we speak of a refrain when an assemblage is sonorous or dominated by sound. This emphasis on the sonorous aspect over the optical is for two reasons, which are the deterritorialization coefficients and powers of the two components. First, it is because sound has a larger deterritorialization coefficient than the optical component. It seems that when sound deterritorializes, it becomes more and more refined. It becomes specialized and autonomous. Color clings more, not necessarily to the object, but to territoriality. When it deterritorializes, it tends to dissolve, to let itself be steered by other components. Second, it is because of the power associated with the people to come. They say that, in art, the people is essential yet lacking. Thus, the problem of the artist is that the modern depopulation of the people results in an open earth. From depopulation, make a cosmic people. From deterritorialization, a cosmic earth. Depopulation is drawing a line, a molecular deviation from the population that is a moral group. And to make a cosmic people is to draw a positive line of light that leads to the plane of consistency. It is for this reason that sound is important. Colors do not move a people. Flags can do nothing without trumpets. Lasers are modulated on sound. The Ritornello is sonorous par excellence. Of course, conversely, this power also means that the force steering in the fascistic direction can be powerful. Lastly, it would be worth adding one important proposition in relation to Ritornello and time. Kant made it explicit that time is a priori form for the experience including music, which is also believed by many non-Kantians. However, there is no such thing as time as an empty form and measure. To put it in Spinoza's term, when different parts move as one to the rhythm, such a rhythmic synchronization makes chronos, that is, time. It is what makes different parts of our body work as one body. For example, the farmer's time is a form of synchronizing his activities with the rhythm of nature in such a way. The Ritornello as rhythmic repetition makes time, not the other way around. This is what it means to say, here, time is not a priori form. Rather, the Ritornello is the priori form of time, which in each case fabricates different times.